Hi there, it's Llarold, and today I'm putting out my Protection Paladin class guide for Shadowlands Patch 9.2. I'm just going to move right through this intro quickly, but before I finish, like and subscribe. Okay, that's it. Now, what's changed? Ashen Hallow's healing was reduced by 15%. You can also press the keybind a second time to cancel it early. You can prevent that by writing a macro that looks like this. Putting an exclamation point at the front of the name of a skill in a macro with no space between the exclamation point and the word will prevent you from toggling it off by hitting it again. This is useful for things like ice block. That's about the only thing I can think of. Otherwise, that's it for place class changes. I cannot believe Prot Pally's damage didn't get nerfed. I don't know why I thought they would do it. Prot Pally damage has been overpowered for 10 years now. I must just be stupid. Prot Pallys live a divinely blessed existence. Who am I to change that? Now let's move on to what's being added in the patch, and we'll start with the Prot Pally tier set bonuses, the most overpowered thing in the universe. The 2-piece bonus grants 12% extra block chance for doing your normal rotation. It's very good, not overpowered, just good, nice, great. Where it gets interesting is the 4-piece. It gives you a chance equal to your block chance to cast Judgment at your enemy whenever you take damage. A decently geared Pally using Holy Shield is going to have about 60% block chance pretty easily. So basically, 60% of the time when you take damage, you cast Judgment. This works from all types of damage, including dots. I dueled a Resto Druid in the Maw. They cast Moonfire on me one time. No, I'm sorry, twice. I did over 60,000 damage to them with Judgment and Holy Shield. I didn't do anything. I took my hands off my keyboard most of the time. I think I cast Flash of Light on myself a couple of times. Over 60,000 damage, just bam, bam, bam. The Judgment generates holy power and triggers other standard Judgment effects such as the talent Judgment of Light. It's just a regular Judgment. The effect has a 3-second internal cooldown, and it tends to proc just about constantly on cooldown in testing. In normal play, this bonus, once you factor in all the extra Shield of the Righteous casts and all the extra juice that you can have overlapping with it, whatever, it's going to be worth like 3,000 to 3,500 DPS in single target, maybe a little bit more in AoE, although the internal cooldown, it kind of caps that off pretty hard around 3,500 DPS, which is insane. I kind of hate how much Blizzard loves giving damage to Prot Pally. Why can they not just try literally any other tank, even just for one patch? That being said, these bonuses absolutely rule. They are incredibly fun. They are, without question, overpowered, and if you argue that they're not, you are acting in bad faith. It is insane how good Prot Pally is without these bonuses, and this pushes them over the top. You already have enough holy power to consistently maintain Shield of the Righteous, so most of this new holy power can be spent on Word of Glory casts to sustain your health pool, or just use more Shield of the Righteous over the top for damage and to guarantee you never let it drop ever. It's great. All right, next up is the double legendary power. This is being time gated until week 5 of the patch, or the 3rd week that the Mythic Raid is open. I understand why they're doing it for the race to world first purposes, but I hate it. Basically, it works like this. When you complete the campaign quest for that week, you receive a legendary belt that you can wear along with any other legendary in the game. The belt grants you your Covenant's legendary power, so for specs that have good Covenant legendaries like, Kiri and Prot Pally, this winds up making them extremely strong. Kiri and Paladin is the tankiest Covenant and by far the best for Mythic Plus. Kiri and Paladin's Covenant legendary is great, and it has been the go-to for most Kiri and Paladin players in patch 9.1, including myself. This is great. It means that Kiri and Pally just kind of gets a free legendary. They become even stronger. They gain a ton of extra damage, or utility if they want, from being able to equip that second legendary to go with their already terrific Covenant legendary. Finthir Paladin really only has one thing to offer, and that's imbalanced amounts of damage in raids. It's incredibly strong for dealing huge burst damage, That's it, but that's enough. The Vinthier Pally legendary is why Blizzard changed Ashen Hollow to make it cancelable early by hitting the button a second time. The 4-minute cooldown on Ashen Hollow has been pretty weird and unwieldy throughout Shadowlands. Being able to cancel Ashen Hollow after 30 seconds and cut the cooldown down to around 3 minutes makes it way easier to line up with important burn phases in fights and raid. Otherwise, this legendary isn't really all that good, but it helps Vinthier Pally deal more burst damage, which they're kind of already the best in the game at doing by a huge margin. So that's cool, man. It's good. I'm not upset about it. You know, the Necrolord Paladin legendary is actually pretty good, as is the Night Fae one, but here's the thing. I hate both of those covenants, and they're not good. I will not waste your time or mine by talking about them. Let's move on. And let's move right on to covenants. Prot Pallies have 2 competitive choices. Vinthier is better for raid DPS. I would recommend it for raid. Kyrian is much tankier, offers a lot more utility. I enjoy it a lot more, and it is better in Mythic Plus. Kyrian Paladin probably is the best Mythic Plus tank in Season 3. I'm not 100% sure. Bear Druid is still incredibly strong. Monk's actually looking pretty nice with it, but Kyrian Paladin is definitely a contender. I'm not going to correct that. It's in. Paladin. I think I pretty much covered it. Kyrian Pally in raid is an option. It's very tanky. I would do it if you're really undergeared, like really trying to get a crappy character in and get some gear. But if your gear's decent at all, Vinthier's damage is really hard to give up. Even in serious high-end progression rating, you kind of are relying on that damage output. All right, now let's move on to Soulbinds. For Vinthier, Theotar is your guy. General Draven is good. He's a lot more consistent defensively, but if you're wanting consistent defense, I say play Kyrian. Theotar will give you massive amounts of mastery when his umbrellas proc. You stand in them, you pop all your cooldowns, you do face-melting amounts of damage. That's Vinthier Pally. As Kyrian, Mechanicos is your guy. I would never change the Soulbind tree at all. If I was tanking single target raid content, I wouldn't swap this around. I would just play Vinthier. All right, I talked about Soulbind, so now let's quickly cover Conduits. Protection Pally Potency Conduits is a tongue twister. Also, they are extremely good. Again, when you compare them to most of the other tank classes, it's just stunning how good they all are. It's like, on the one hand, you want to be like upset that the designers are like, oh, they favor Prot Pally, but really I think it's more like, oh, they wasted they used all their good ideas and brain power on this spec, and then the other ones just got whatever was left over. I don't even think it's intentional. For both Vinthier and Kyrian, the Covenant Conduit is worth running in every tree. Vengeful Shock and Punish the Guilty are the other 2 options available, and they've been pretty competitive with each other thus far in Shadowlands. Vengeful Shock is more popular in Mythic Plus, in part because Divine Toll from being Kyrian throws a bunch of Avenger Shields around, which interacts with that and triggers that on a bunch of enemies. Punish the Guilty is more popular in raids because it's a better single target DPS increase. With the massive increase in Judgment Cast you're going to get thanks to the 4-piece bonus, I think Punish could wind up jumping over Vengeful Shock everywhere, but I doubt it. I think the fact that Kyrian is triggering Vengeful Shock like crazy in AoE is probably going to keep, Kyrian runs Vengeful Shock, Vinthier runs Punish the Guilty, both of them run their Covenant-specific Conduit, and then that's it. It may also change if they wind up nerfing the 4-piece, which, I don't know. We'll see. Again, Pally's Endurance Conduit options are also very good. Resolute Defender is amazing. It significantly increases the uptime of Ardent Defender, which is great. Shielding Words is also pretty good. It grants a shield worth a decent portion of Word of Glory's healing. That really helps out a lot with Paladin's self-healing, which tends to come in really big bursts, but with decent-sized gaps in between each heal. Golden Path is a very steady, stable trickle of healing anytime you're standing in Consecration, which should be 100% of the time. Lastly, Royal Decree is another decent option. It reduces Guardian of Ancient Kings' cooldown slightly, and more importantly, makes it give you a free Word of Glory. A guaranteed free heal when you're taking a lot of damage and need a defensive cooldown is really, really nice. Something that's really good to be able to plan around. The other defensive conduits are generally pretty forgettable. Finally, on the subject of finesse conduits, Light's Barding adds a ton of extra duration onto Divine Steve, which helps a lot with Pally's very weak mobility. Otherwise, I really don't consider using the other options at all. Okay, next up is Legendaries, and there are only 3 pieces I need to talk about here. Before I get into it, let me add that tier set pieces force you not to wear helm, shoulder, chest, gloves, legs, slot pieces. You could wear a Legendary in one of them, but then you're banking on getting 4 pieces of tier across the other 4 slots. No thanks. First up is Mad Paragon. It's the best raid Legendary. It synergizes extremely well with Ashen Hollow. It is a humongous damage increase, especially in single target. It's awesome. I would use it 100% of the time in raids. Next is Bulwark of Righteous Fury, which is a more consistent AoE DPS option and a terrific choice in Mythic Plus. Until you unlock double Legendary, I would still play Kyrian and use Divine Resonance. Once you finally unlock that time-gated content, being able to wear both of these powers at the same time is going to shoot your damage up to the moon. You will absolutely be slamming mobs into the ground in AoE. It's so awesome. The only other option I really want to mention here is the Magistrate's Judgment. Now, because of the new 4-piece bonus, this Legendary actually gets much stronger. It will let you cast a ton more Shields of the Righteous or Words of Glory. The problem with casting those Shields of the Righteous is that basically they're all going to be wasted. They'll do damage, but you're already going to be way over 100% uptime on Shield of the Righteous. So, you know, Bulwark of Fury is a lot better at adding damage than the Magistrate's Judgment. However, you could use those Words of Glory to provide massive amounts of group healing, especially if you're talented into Hand of the Protector. I think a Kyrian Prot Paladin using double Legendary, the 4-piece tier bonus, and the Magistrate's Judgment could probably tank most Mythic Plus dungeons at a pretty high item level, no, a pretty high key level, without any healer at all. But does that sound fun? No, not to me. It sounds awful. I absolutely do not want to be the group's healer while I am also tanking. Maybe you do. Good for you. Here you go. Best of luck. And I'm sorry. All right, now let's move on to talents. Paladins have a main raid setup and a main Mythic Plus setup, but they also have a lot of swappable options across most of the tiers. That being said, I think the new tier sets totally lock the first tier into Holy Shield in all situations, which is actually a really good thing. It's the tankiest option, and now it becomes the best choice for DPS. That's terrific. First Avenger's very good in AoE, and as Kyrian, I think it's a must-use, but it's not so great as Venthyr and in Raid. Crusader's Judgment is primarily about maximizing single-target DPS, so it's much more of a raid talent. I use Cavalier anytime I'm doing Torghast, but otherwise I default to Unbreakable Spirit. Blessing of Spell Warding can be extremely strong in raids for immuning boss mechanics, but that's very much a case-by-case basis type of deal. The choice between Divine Purpose and Seraphim has been pretty easy up until this point in Shadowlands. You take Seraphim to maximize your raid DPS, and Divine Purpose to maximize your Shield of the Righteous uptime and Mythic Plus, and that's it. At the start of patch 9.2, that should hold up, but as the new tier set gives a lot more holy power to play with, I think Seraphim maybe sees use in Mythic Plus. Divine Purpose does help with making sure you never ever let Shield of the Righteous drop, even when you're getting really bad luck with Avenger Shield resets. But I think Seraphim could actually be good in Mythic Plus. Being able to use Seraphim, Wings, Divine Toll, and just blast through packs of enemies with a couple of Shield of the Righteous casts in a row is really fun sounding from a damage point of view. I think that could be more valuable than the steady trickle of damage and healing offered by Divine Purpose, but hey, both options are definitely very good. Judgment of Light interacting with the 4-piece is really strong. It adds a lot of passive group healing, and it's absolutely worth considering if you're just wanting an easy option. Hand of the Protector I already talked about. You can use it in all the extra holy power you can generate to heal your party up. Ugh, no thanks. It makes me mad to even think about. Probably strong, but I'm mad. The slow from Consecrated Ground is really nice in Mythic Plus. That is what I will continue to use for dungeons, and Judgment of Light will be my go-to in raids. Finally, in the last tier, Righteous Protector has been the most popular talent in both Raid and Mythic Plus, all expansion long. With even more holy power to throw at it, it's just gonna get better. Final Stand can be really good if you're under-geared and struggling to stay alive, and that actually applies both in Raids and Mythic Plus. I prefer to always run Righteous Protector unless I absolutely, positively must be able to Divine Shield AoE taunt. Final Stand is really good on some giant, dangerous trash pulls and raids, but, you know, then you swap back to Righteous Protector for the boss fight. The Prot Paladin rotation, despite how much damage it's capable of doing, is really easy. You should use your cooldowns as much as possible, unless you're holding them for a specific reason, like an ad spawn or an extra damage phase, or you're about to come up to an intermission where the boss stops taking damage. The only thing that changes in AoE is that Avenger Shield jumps up in value ahead of Judgment. Otherwise, everything else stays the same. You always want to be standing in consecrations at all times while you're tanking. You get a ton of damage reduction passively just by standing in consecration, so if you have to move out of it, you want to recast it as soon as you stop moving. Maintaining Shield of the Righteous as much as you can is really the key to staying tanky as a paladin. It deals a good amount of damage too. You can use Word of Glory whenever it's free, which happens every 5 times you cast Shield of the Righteous, but you really shouldn't be spending holy power to hard cast Word of Glory too often. It's not the end of the world as long as you don't let Shield of the Righteous fall off, but if you find yourself spamming Word of Glory several times in a row on yourself, you're probably making a mistake somewhere else, like letting Shield of the Righteous fall off, or failing to use defensive cooldowns when you should, or letting something that should be interrupted just freely cast on you. The basic stat priority for Prot Paladin has changed from the start of last season of Mythic Plus and last raid. It now heavily favors Mastery. Mastery is your most important stat. You want as much as you can get. It's defensively very strong, and now that Block Chance directly contributes to damage output, it is a great offensive stat. Haste and Versatility are both still very good and very consistent, and they're great too. Ultimately, the most important things to go after are tier set bonuses, sockets, and item level, then Mastery and the rest of the stats. As for weapon enchants, Lightless Force is the best for dealing AoE damage, Sinful Revelation is the best for pure single target. As far as trinkets go, there are some decent options from dungeons and raids, and I'll just highlight the best ones. Inscrutable Quantum Device from The Other Side is a very strong stat on use trinket that's really good for Venthyr Pallies and raids. The damage it adds during Ashen Hallow is enormous, and now that you're able to lower the Ashen Hallow cooldown by canceling it early if you're wearing the Covenant Legendary, you could potentially kind of line IQD and Ashen Hallow's cooldown up with each other all the time, which is terrific. Phial of Putrefaction from Plaguefall is a simple single target DPS increase from Mythic Plus that's totally passive, but very nice in raids. The best defensive trinket for Mythic Plus is Blood Spattered Scale, which is from The Other Side. It's an excellent defensive trinket that still offers a decent chunk of damage output. Both of these last two trinkets were actually just nerfed recently in an attempt to make other trinket options more desirable. But they didn't buff anything else for Mythic Plus, so good luck with that. Codex of the First Technique from Tazavesh is actually pretty good. And it is something I think a lot of players will be farming now that Tazavesh is being added to the Mythic Plus dungeon pool in Season 3. The stamina's not great, but the damage reflection effect is good in Mythic Plus, and decent in raid fights where you're constantly tanking. There are two new trinkets from Sepulchre of the first ones that are okay, the rest are relatively generic. Pulsating Rift Shard is an active defensive trinket. It takes 3 seconds to go off and has a 1-minute cooldown. It's kind of like blood spattered scale at first glance, but the 3-second windup and the extremely thin line make it pretty uncomfortable to use. On a training dummy, it's a pretty good defensive trinket, but in practice, I have real concerns. That being said, the 1-minute cooldown is decent, so I think this will wind up being okay. They rebalanced this trinket while I was working on this video, all of the videos. They've actually rebalanced it twice. It's okay. I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if it gets more changes. I don't love it. Pocket Protoforge is really simple. It's just a proc shield trinket. It's kind of boring, but it is okay. 1 proc per minute, though, is a little inconsistent. It definitely seems like it'll be better in Mythic Plus. Fingers crossed that it gets a buff. If it gets any sort of buff to its proc frequency, then I think it could actually be pretty nice. And I'll just briefly mention Elegy of Eternals, which was giving an insane amount of secondary stat budget, like 1,087 or something at Mythic Raid item level. That trinket has been nerfed by 91% or something to be just a miserably low amount of stat budget now, to the point that it's like on par with Mythic Castle Nathria trinkets. It's crazy how bad this trinket is now. I'm just pointing it out to laugh at it, basically. All right, now let's finish up by quickly going over a couple of trinkets from Sanctum of Domination that I think will still be good next tier, at least for a little while. First is Shard of Anhilda's Aegis from the 9. It's really, really, really strong defensively. It reduces a flat amount of damage from all hits and dot ticks while it's active. It only has a 90-second cooldown, and that damage reduction calculation is done after all damage reduction effects are taken into account. It's great. The only way this doesn't wind up being basically the go-to defensive trinket for all tanks for all of next Mythic Plus season and Raid and so on is if it gets nerfed pretty hard. I have a feeling that they're probably going to nerf it. It really just depends on how hard they nerf it down. If they cut it by like 50% or so, I think it'll basically be dead. If it's more like 25%, 30%, I think it might actually still be pretty competitive with the trinkets out of the next raid. Weave of Warped Fates has been redesigned to be a normal cheat death trinket. Unlike the Splintered Heart of Alar from Castle Nathria, it doesn't really do anything except prevent your death. No damage to nearby enemies and allies, no blowing up and killing your healer, which was fun. The item level on this is a full raid tier higher than Splintered Heart of Alar, so that's good. It'll probably just be, you know, the go-to trinket for high-level Mythic Plus for the rest of the expansion for everybody except Prot Pally. I think the fact that you have Ardent Defender kind of devalues this a little bit. You'll probably wind up running more damage-oriented trinkets, but I still think this is a good one to have for progression in Sepulchre, the first ones, and, you know, maybe for high-level Mythic Plus pushing. We'll see. As we're heading into the final patch of Shadowlands, Prot Paladin looks insanely strong yet again. The new content looks very fun. The new bonuses are great, but also, despite my complaining about them, really, really, really fun. Prot Pallies were great in Sanctum of Domination and in Mythic Plus Season 2, and I think they're going to be great again in Sepulchre, the first ones, and Mythic Plus Season 3, thanks to their awesome new tier set bonuses and the terrific synergy they're getting out of running double Legendary. I am really looking forward to playing my Prot Pally. Yeah, see, I've gone full copium already. I went from I cannot beat them, I'll just join them. It didn't take long. I think that covers it. If you have any questions about Prot Pallies in Shadowlands Patch 9.2, ask away. Stay tuned for more Shadowlands content, and thank you for watching. Bye.